from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. Happy to be here with you. Wednesday night edition of the show. Our phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. And a number of things we're going to talk about. A couple of nights ago, we talked about how Google was being reported to be involved in election interference. We're going to talk a little bit about that straight ahead. Also want to get into a couple of other things. One of the things I want to talk about is what happened in Washington today, right? There was plenty going on, lots of hearings, lots of audio, lots to discuss, honestly. And the idea of selling influence was on full display today. Man, let me tell you, there was plenty going on with respect to that front. So we're going to get into that as well. And plenty more. Quick headline here. Rasmussen reports the Republicans have a 6-point lead in their battle to maintain their narrow House majority. 6-point lead. That sounds kind of thin, right? Kind of thin. There's also some audio I want to share with you. We've got a clip of audio from my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, all out crazy. And she was on the House today, in the House, I should say, in one of the committees, grilling people, asking questions. And lo and behold, she gets into a back and forth. And this is a good one, right? She's asking Tony Bobulinski a question. Now, Tony Bobulinski is a former associate of Hunter Biden's, one of his business partners, who's now said, hey, what I've seen Hunter and his dad and his whole family do is a bunch of illegal stuff. These guys were doing everything they could to do things that were not in the best interest of the country, in his opinion. And AOC tries to set him up and say, look, have you seen anything happen here that was illegal? Did you see them commit any crimes? And the exchange is funny, to say the least. Check this out.
Mr. Bobulinski, I heard your opening statement. It's submitted to the record, part of our proceedings. I have a quick question. Simple. Is it your testimony today that you personally witnessed President Joe Biden commit a crime?
I believe the fact that he was sitting with me while I was putting together a business deal.
Did you witness the president commit a crime? Is it your testimony today?
Yes.
And what crime have you witnessed?
How much time do I have to go through it?
It is simple. You name the crime. Did you watch him steal something?
Corruption statutes, RICO and conspiracy.
What is it? What is the crime, sir? Specifically.
You asked me to answer the question. I answered the question.
No.
RICO, you're obviously not familiar with. Corruption statutes.
Excuse me, sir. RICO is not a crime. It is a category. What is the crime?
It's a category of crimes that you're then charged
You have charges.
A long 100.
You have charges. Sir, please
want me to name the exact statute under RICO?
Yes.
Well, it's funny. In this committee room, everyone's not here. There's over 18
All right, sir. I reclaim my
lawyers
time.
that went to law school.
I reclaim my time.
You guys
hey,
to
thank
define
you,
the
sir. I reclaim my time.
RICO.
Clearly, what we are seeing here today is a continuation of the 15-month saga of the Republican majority lost in the desert. Impeachment 101. The majority party or whomever is raising impeachment must accuse the president of a high crime, a specific high crime or misdemeanor. I would like to submit to the record HRES 918, the House resolution to open this impeachment inquiry.
Without objection to order.
This resolution does not outline a high crime or misdemeanor. It's not here.
All right, there you go. I thought she was done. Apparently, she had plenty to say. AOC all out crazy. She's going in. And she was obviously mocked after that all over, the social medias, saying that RICO is not a crime. And this is, of course, the repercussions, of course. What could you do? Well, what could you do here? Now, AOC was asking in the back and forth. You heard how it went. And they land on this place, this RICO is not a crime. What crime specifically, sir? And he says, I don't know, corruption. And he rattles off a couple. And this is no good, right? She's very, very upset by this. And excuse me, sir. RICO is not a crime, it's a category. And of course, this was the RICO, which is, what they use for John Gotti and, many other gangsters. Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act, which targets dishonest businesses, activities such as money laundering as well as organized crime. Former President Donald Trump and over a dozen of his allies were charged in a sprawling racketeering case out of Fulton County, Georgia, last August, over alleged 2020 election tampering, right? So Trump got charged with this just for his involvement in trying to get all of his votes counted. And yet Biden, who's, he's been accused of plenty of different things by plenty of different people, not guilty in any way, right? Just squeaky clean. That's currently what we have going on here. And there was a lot of other interesting exchanges. There was a clip of Congressman Byron Donalds, who did, I think, an extraordinary job, really kind of filtering through the money trail. And if we have time, I want to play that when we return, plus your calls before we get into our guests and everything else. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. Thank you, buddy. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right? But right. You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So Tony Bobolinsky was on Capitol Hill and giving his testimony about what he believed to be crimes that Joe Biden had committed, in his opinion. And while President Biden can likely learn a thing or two about the rule of law, there's an entire lesson about the rule of law versus mob rule, and it's not rooted in AOC's version of history or Joe Biden's version of history, but an actual part of our United States history, something that we should have learned the first time and overall could have learned from our second president, John Adams. And there's an interesting lesson of what John Adams taught our soon-to-be nation about the rule of law versus mob rule. And to help us recall that and learn that is Lee Habeeb. He's the creator and host of Our American Stories. It's a podcast and radio show. Lee Habeeb, welcome, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You bet. So when we take a flashback and see what's going on with the lessons that we've learned from President John Adams, how do you think these lessons fit into today's public discourse?
Well, there was I've been studying this for a long time because I went to the University of Virginia Law. And my favorite stories are those types of stories where someone defends someone's right to the presumption of innocence and to due process, even if they think they're odious, or they defend someone's right to free speech. I think of the ACLU taking on the neo-Nazis as they marched through Skokie. And it was Jewish lawyers who defended them, right? And remember these famous cases, right? Skokie, Illinois, where the most Holocaust survivors lived in anywhere in the United States, and the neo-Nazis wanted to march there. And Jewish lawyers for the ACLU said, I hate the neo-Nazis, but they have a right to march even in our town with Jewish Holocaust survivors. And this was, in essence, saying, who is the government to regulate any speech? Who's
right.
the government to dictate who the winners are and the losers are? And by the way, there was tremendous short-term harm done to David Goldberger because his synagogue wasn't happy with him. They thought he was defending the neo-Nazis. And we told this story on Our American Stories about a year ago. And so he goes into the synagogue, and not just his own, but synagogues throughout Illinois. And he lets them know that he's not defending the neo-Nazis. He despises them. He's defending the First Amendment. And that amendment applies to everyone. And he then reminded everybody of what the Germans did to the Jews' right to free speech. He reminded them that these are principles, they're enduring principles, they're free will. He even talked about the Jewish heritage of a God who lets people disagree with God and suffer the consequences. These are principles that are tough to defend, but in the end are worth defending. And Goldberger's esteem in the Jewish community rose to incredible heights later on. And we learned from John Adams when he defended the Redcoats in the Boston Massacre that, my goodness, it helped his life too. So the Adams story reminds me of some of these other epic free speech stories. And if we remember one of our favorite, we all read To Kill a Mockingbird in high school, right? And that mob wanted that black man to go to prison because he was black, and that was that. Presumption of guilt, right? But this presumption of innocence is precious. It's precious. I remember way back in the day when I was working on the Laura Ingraham show, and we would bring on a young guy named Stephen Miller. Now, you all know Stephen Miller now because he works at American First Legal. He worked for President Trump. But we put him on the air as a junior at Duke because he was out there defending the Duke students against rape charges that proved to be made up. The prosecutor went to jail. The school was fined for suspending these kids' rights to play lacrosse, to ruin their lives with deans and students screaming, rapist, 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 leave the campus, as if that couldn't have been their son, that maybe the girl lied. We're not supposed to believe all women or believe all men. By the way, in that case, the prosecutor went to jail, and the cop who framed them killed himself.
Wow. I
remember
that case, but I didn't remember the cop.
The cop killed himself because he framed these guys because he just didn't like them. These were rich white kids from New Jersey and Long Island who walked around Durham and just he looked down on the people of Durham. Plus, it was an election year, and the prosecutor was running and courting the black vote. So he kept telling them that he would bring these guys to justice. Sound familiar? Letitia James, get Trump. Yeah. I'm running to get Trump. I mean, look, you can like Trump, you can hate Trump. Let me tell you what did not happen to Bill Clinton. He committed a felony when he lied under oath. Not one state, not one city brought him up on criminal charges. Not one. Thank goodness, right? Because we shouldn't be prosecuting our political enemies. We do this in Venezuela. We do this in China. in Russia. In America, I can't believe I'm seeing it. I can't believe I'm witnessing. And that's why I wrote this John Adams story. It's a remarkable commitment. It's a remarkable life story. And I'd love to share it with your audience. I mean, it's a remarkable thing Adams did with his life. He was in no position to do it. He risked a lot to defend the Redcoats, as you can imagine. Not exactly a popular group of people in 1770. And there was Adams going, well, if no lawyer in town is going to defend them, I'm going to. And that's essentially why he took their case.
Amigos, we're on with Lee Habeeb. He's the creator and the host of Our American Stories podcast and weekly radio show. And I love these tidbits of history and, of course, the remarkable storytelling ability that Lee Habeeb possesses really brings these to life. And, again, this is a country that, just newly being formed, not quite a nation yet, and still figuring out its way. And here we are with some of these truths, that kind of like what you just mentioned, Lee, about defending those that have a right to be defended, irrespective of their position in your life. They could be your enemy or your adversary, but sometimes you just stand up for what's right, the bigger issue, the bigger picture, and something that Adams did here. Let's take it from the top and talk about, why Adams felt a need to do this. Was it his altruism or was it something else?
Well, you have to understand Adams first, where he came from. He came from nothing. He went to Harvard College. That changed his life, getting a scholarship to Harvard. It was a divinity school then. And he did well. And his father was a deacon in the church. And so he had this sort of religious zeal and loved religion, but yet he loved Blackstone. He was studying the principles of British law. And as we're forming this new nation, what are we responding to, right? What we're responding to is, well, think about what's happening in 1770. This is the year that Parliament passes the Townshend Act. And this is the taxes are being heaped on the colonists. But more than that, what they're doing is they're headquartering customs officials throughout the city. They're doing warrantless searches. They're even quartering troops. They're impressing soldiers off ships and just taking them away. So here's Adams knowing that if we can't have due process in this country and have it mean something, and if he can't apply this to the Redcoats on the day of the Boston Massacre, then what do these principles mean? So the day of the Boston Massacre, obviously, these aren't loved guys, the Redcoats. And people are rioting in the streets. There are low-level protests happening for months. And on this one occasion, the Redcoats are being swarmed by a mob, and they shoot. And, of course, the mob says they shot unprovoked. In fact, I heard a captain order the shooting. Well, John Adams, he's wondering whether that's true. He's asking around to see who's going to represent these guys. Not one lawyer in Boston will take him. And here's Adams. He's not rich. He has spent 10 years building up his legal practice, and he decides to take them on.
Folks, we are on with Lee Habeeb. He's the creator and the host of Our American Stories. This is just getting good. Come back with the popcorn. I'm enthralled with this story. We're coming right back with Lee Habeeb and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez. Amigos, welcome back, familia, and we continue our little trip down memory lane with Lee Habeeb. He's the host of Our American Stories. And Lee, right before the break, we left off. You were really describing the scene as looks like the Boston Massacre was about to unfold, and John Adams deciding to defend the Redcoats. Let's pick up where you left off.
Well, and imagine this. I mean, this is like Boston is the hotbed of all activity by the colonies. And what, if you remember what, in resistance, if you remember what the British were trying to do is cut off Boston from the rest of the colonies, right? And then stop the nascent revolution because they were sensing a problem. But guess what happens? Because of the Boston Massacre, because of all these new laws, even George Washington and the guys in Virginia who have nothing to do with Boston, right? This is far removed. They're like, we're actually with you guys now. The British, because of their outrageousness, were unifying the colonists. So the easiest thing for Adams to do at this time, and again, he'd be George Washington's vice president, the first vice president. And here's what he did. He said, you know what? Just because everybody hates these guys, just because the Townsend Acts are terrible, just because these redcoats are horrible, doesn't mean they're guilty of murder. So he takes the case. He fears for his life. He has death threats from the mob. He loses half his clients, and he was not born a rich man. In fact, he was born sort of just hand to mouth. His father was just an ordinary laborer and farmer, and but for his scholarship to Harvard, John Adams would have never gone to college and never been able to be a lawyer. And so he takes the case, and the first thing he does is fact finding. He wants to know the truth. And he interviews people, and he interviews onlookers, and he interviews, and he interviews. And he finally gets one person on his deathbed, a doctor and a prominent one in town, to say, look, these guys defended themselves. The mob was screaming, kill, kill, kill. They were pelting these guys. They were throwing ice at these guys. They had no choice. And so here's Adams now getting the testimony, getting the facts, getting the evidence. And that's what you have to do, because the prosecution and the state have tremendous power. And this is the problem they were trying to solve, right? The British were using their power. So we Americans have to be different. This is what Adams is saying. We're different than the British. We're different than every other rule that ever existed. We're not using the king's power. We're not using our personal power. Self-defense is a natural and divine defense, and I'm going to do that. And the presumption and innocence is a divine thing. So he's actually continually making references to these things. And by the way, in his opening statement, and it's an amazing piece of rhetoric, but this is what he says in his opening statement. And I'm only reading this because your audience will go, oh, I know these lines. He says, facts are stubborn things. And whatever may be our wishes or our inclinations or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence, nor is the law less stable than the facts. If an assault was made to endanger the lives of these soldiers, the law is clear. They had a right to kill in their own defense. And then just minutes later, in a master class in civil liberties, he looks and gets close to these jurors, and he says to them in sort of a low tone, by the way, David McCullough describes this in his book on John Adams, the rules of common law, which authorize a man to preserve his own life at the expense of another's, are not contradicted by any divine or moral law, he said. We talk of liberty and property, but if we cut up the law of self-defense, then we cut up the foundation of both of those things. In other words, he's saying if we can't defend our property, then we don't have property. If we can't defend our life, then we don't have a life. And the jury is enraptured. And in the first trial, and there are two, the first trial is of the captain, they come out in 3 hours. And now there's a jury on the soldiers. And the question was, which one of those soldiers acted in self-defense and which one of them just started shooting randomly and poorly. And those guys weren't charged with murder in the end. 2 were charged with manslaughter and 4 were acquitted. Now, how wonderful, right? Now, if only that could have happened to all those cops around OJ, right? Or all those cops that were sitting around during the Minneapolis thing with George Floyd, right? Not every one of those cops did something wrong. Some watched. Some did nothing. Some tried to interfere. You don't go to jail for watching, but all of those people went to jail. And you can't do that in the law. And what I loved about Adams is you have to take each individual and try them on the facts, not the passions of the day. And this has been the way we've tried to do justice here in the country for a couple of centuries. And it's what set us apart from every nation. And here's John Adams doing it. And in the end, it's funny, David McCullough, at the end of his book, he says, at the end, McCullough says about Adams, he says, years later, reflecting from the perspective of old age, Adams himself would conclude with pardonable pride that his part in the defense was one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested and patriotic actions of his entire life, and one of the best pieces of service that he ever rendered to his country. So imagine, he's putting that defense of the Redcoats above being the first vice president, being the second president, because if more of us stood up for people we don't like and their right to speak, I don't like these laws that say you can't be on a campus and say from the river to the sea. I'm offended by these kids. I think they're nitwits, right? But I am as pro-Israel, as pro the Jewish people. I've written about this extensively. But we cannot go to the other edge and say to a group whose speech we find odious, you can't speak. Now, if you start pushing Jewish kids around, you start threatening them, that's another thing. But you want to carry dumb placards around on your campus? Be my guest. Make an idiot of yourself, and we'll counter your speech with our speech. And I worry sometimes that our side, in reaction to the conservatives, in reaction to the absolute of excesses of the cancel culture, of the use of the power of the state to suppress speech and to go after people and prosecute them for crimes that are probably not crimes to begin with, that we don't return the favor, that we stand on a higher ground, a higher principle. People will be attracted to us if we do that. And they'll be thinking one thing and one thing alone. You guys actually believe what you believe. And that's a beautiful thing, because it's a beautiful thing to defend someone you hate. It's really hard. It's hard to love somebody you don't like. And if you're a Christian, I am, then this is sort of God's command. Love your neighbor. That's not an easy one. It's probably the hardest commandment there is. Love your neighbor, especially if your neighbor's yelling at you all the time or bugging you.
Yeah, or if you're, somebody who's constantly getting done dirty by your neighbors, and I don't mean neighbor figuratively. I mean, your fellow man. Folks, we're on with Lee Habeeb, and it's funny, Lee, that you bring that up, and not to become overly spiritual here, but in that same lesson of loving your neighbor, it teaches of what does it profit you to love those that love you, but of course you've got to love those, bless those that curse you, and that is the hard part. And when you look at a story like this, that rings true in so many ways. There's so many lessons built into this. Folks, Lee Habeeb is our guest, and we're discussing this story about John Adams and what he taught a soon-to-be nation about the rule of law versus mob rule. Again, Lee Habeeb is the host of Our American Stories. It's a podcast and a syndicated radio show, and we're going to continue with Lee Habeeb straight ahead and get the rest of this story. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There's more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos, and we continue our discussion with Lee Habeeb. And a quick aside before we jump right back into that riveting story. March 20th, 1854 was 1854, was the birthday of the Republican Party in the United States, making it 170 years old. How's that for this day in history for you? Now, folks, Lee Habeeb is our guest, and he's the host of Our American Stories, a podcast and weekly radio show. And what we're talking about is this America that was just, very newly formed, and John Adams and the lesson that he's teaching us of mob rule and the rule of law. Lee Habeeb, let's dig back in.
Yeah, let's face it. The rule of law was on trial. This is what Adams understood. The rule of law was on trial, which means the principles that would lead to the revolution 6 years later and that would be undergirded in our Constitution and then in our Bill of Rights, which was the last part, literally they were birthed there. Because it's always in fire and in trials that we learn who we are. It's when we learn our character. It's not when times are easy. It's when times are hard. Nations learn their character too. And so do prosecutors. And prosecutors have to resist that mob. They're the last line of defense for justice. They're not there to be popular. They're there to do the right thing. So Adams knows that the rule of law is on trial, but he also knows something else, this idea of presumption of innocence. And in the closing statement, he actually says, better that many guilty persons escape unpunished than one innocent person should be punished. That's what we're here, he told the jury, to litigate. Should people who are not guilty be put in jail because we don't like them? This is a huge statement, right? And it's the fundamental part of our legal system now, this presumption of innocence. And what Adams was really saying is this. If the state can arbitrarily throw people in prison, then the criminals we have to worry about the most aren't the criminals running around in the street trying to rob us or attack us or shoot us. It's the government itself. It's the state itself. So that's why we have an exclusionary rule. That's why we have a demand for a search warrant. And that's why we have a trial, why we put the burden on the prosecution to get 12 jurors to agree beyond a reasonable doubt that someone's guilty, because we don't want innocent people thrown in prison. If we make it too easy, the state will just start throwing people in prison. And we're China. We're Venezuela. This is the distinguishing characteristic of this country, among many others. But this one, people race to this country because of this. They race to this country because of this. You look at the judicial system in the Middle East. You look at, and I'm a Lebanese. I know about the judicial system in the Middle East. You don't want to deal with the arbitrariness. There are women now being thrown in jail for the violation of bail laws, and it's completely and not uniformly acted upon, and there's no representation, and there's no due process. And the next thing you know, you're just wasting away in jail. We know that Xi, and I don't want to call him President Xi because he's Chairman Xi, he's chairman of the Communist Party. People disappear there. Putin makes people disappear. The cartels in South America and Latin America make people disappear. In America, we'll even let OJ walk. And by the way, that ticked off a lot of people that OJ walked because we pretty much knew he did it, right? But he didn't convince those jurors, and the prosecution had really put on a bad case, a terrible case. Evidence was gone. I watched that trial. I was in law school at the time, or just graduated, and I went, what a mess the prosecutors are making of this case. They didn't button it up. We can think OJ did it. You got to prove he did it. And I don't like what OJ did. I believe he did it. But I don't believe he did it beyond a reasonable doubt, given the case that the LA prosecutors put on. And it pained me to say that because there's two dead people, right? And those families didn't get their justice. But that's what justice looks like, right? We can't just put people in prison because we think someone did something wrong. We got to prove it and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And if we don't use that as our process, then the country's lost. And I'm worried that there are prosecutors running around this country right now, masquerading as prosecutors, but basically prosecuting people because they don't like the political affiliation of the people they're putting on trial. I worry for my nation when stuff like that happens, and more of us need to know this stuff, and more of us need to fight for these things, and then vote on these matters,
If the glove don't fit, you must acquit, right, Lee Habeeb? And,
oh, man.
As you're saying all this, it reminds me, I make jest of it, but the reality is when you're talking about prosecutors going rogue, I can't help but think of, everything that's happening to Trump right now and how it's really, it's like all hands on deck, get Trump. So I want to get your thoughts on that before we wrap. Folks, we're going to come right back with Lee Habeeb. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with Lee Habeeb, the host of Our American Stories. And Lee, you're talking about prosecutors going rogue, and I mentioned that it seems like the effort to get Trump. What say you?
Well, look, when prosecutors run for office, and by the way, for elected office, saying they're going to get someone, I don't care if it's Trump or Biden, I don't care who it is, that person should be disqualified and disbarred. That's how bad I think that is. That's not your job to run on getting somebody. And I understand a lot of people don't like Trump. A lot of people didn't like Obama. A lot of people didn't like Clinton. That's not why we go and get people. We have elections for that. We have elections. Just don't vote for the guy, but don't criminalize the fact that you don't like him. And don't say that there's a threat to democracy. And because there's such a great threat, by any means necessary, right? The ends justify the means. This is what Adams was saying. The ends don't justify the means. We become the very monsters we deplore. We become the British. We become the people who entered our homes and threw us out and quartered our troops and and quartered troops in our places and did warrantless searches. We're not them. That experience with the British is what led to all these civil rights that we enjoy as Americans today. And people from around the world come here in large measure, not just for the economic outlook. They come here to feel safe from their own government. I have a friend who grew up in Uganda. And he said, Lee, when the police would come, we'd run because they were rapists and they'd steal from us. I mean, can you imagine that, living in a place where the cops and the state are the enemy of the people? This is a terrible thing, and that's why we have all this due process and this rule of law. It's a beautiful thing. It's worth defending.
Lee, let everybody know how they can, learn more about the program that you do, Our American Stories, and not just this particular story, but all the rest of the great stories that you do. How do they follow you? How do they tune in?
Yeah, go to ouramericanstories.com, or better still, just Our American Stories. It's available on every possible podcast. It's on stations all around the country if you want to go on ouramericanstories.com. But the podcasts are there. And we don't just tell stories of John Adams. We just told the story of Dale Earnhardt for Daytona and how moonshining led to NASCAR, how the modern NFL became the modern NFL. Heck, who John D. Rockefeller really was and what he did with all of his money at the end of his life, or Carnegie. We tell stories about everything, including, for my money, the most important part of our show is the role faith played in the life of this country. No abolition movement without Christians. No civil rights movement without Christians. And we like to get those stories in because there aren't enough good stories about what people do with their faith. We know some of the bad stories. We've experienced some bad stories of people in our lives who do bad things in the name of faith, right? But the really remarkable things done in the name of faith, we love to tell those stories too.
Folks, Lee Habeeb is the host of Our American Stories. Lee Habeeb, sir, you nailed it like usual. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of our program. It is Wednesday. No, is it Wednesday? Is it Wednesday? Thursday? Anybody? It's Wednesday. That's what I thought. Making sure. Wednesday night edition of the program. Our telephone number, 833-4825-337. 833-4-Valdez is the number if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation. And the news of the day, right? We've seen Rasmussen poll coming out, says Republicans have a 6-point lead in their battle to maintain their narrow House majority. We also have the House holding public hearings with Tony Bobulinski and others that were associates of Hunter Biden and the Biden family influence peddling scheme, which is part of the impeachment inquiry to President Joe, who I like to call El Baboso Biden. And there's also some news coming out of Georgia. Fulton County judge is now allowing Trump to appeal the Fani Willis ruling. Of course, we call her Funny Willis here. And there's just so much going on. And, you know, this is an interesting case, this Funny Willis, because they're saying that Trump was interfering in the election. And I think the opposite is true overall, especially when it comes to big tech. And the biggest amongst the big tech is Google. And earlier in the week, I talked about it a little bit, but there was a report that came out from the Media Research Center that Google has been involved in election interference some 41 times. And I found that to be both, you know, like, wow, but like, okay, yeah, it didn't really shock me. That's what these guys do in so many ways. But it nonetheless, 41 times, like, man, it's great that they were able to pinpoint that. But it's eye-opening to see that this is how flippant they are with how they approach this stuff. They don't care about you. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the founding of this country. They don't care about our constitutional Republican system, if you will, and how we elect people. The only thing they care about is winning and raw power. And it's it's telling and it's sad at the same time. And to talk a little bit about that and a couple of other news items of the day that I want to get his take on is Brent Bozell. Brent Bozell is the founder and president of the Media Research Center. Brent Bozell, welcome back, sir.
Rich, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Always a pleasure, sir. So let's talk about this. Is a big headline here. 41 times that Google was found to be interfering in the elections. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah. Well, let's begin here. This is, one could argue, and I will definitely argue, that these constitute illegal campaign contributions because a corporation is not allowed to make a campaign contribution to a federal campaign. So these are deliberate, blatant attempts to put the thumb down on the election process in the United States. We've looked at it since 2008. We saw 41 cases, not just Republicans, and this will be the interesting one. It is anyone who challenges the most liberal person in the race gets censored. And this has happened every single election, and it's not just presidential. It's also at the congressional level. Going back to 2008, it is not just endorsing candidates, it's endorsing campaigns, conventions, writers who criticize candidates. There's a whole series of different ways that Google is deliberately putting Republicans on page 2, where less than 1% of the public ever goes to look for them. That sort of thing. And we found it over and over and over again. This is deliberate. This is exactly as you said, Rich. These people do not care about the rule of law. They don't. Have you noticed that whatever happens out of big tech these days, Big tech never announces. It's always exposed by somebody. All these creepy things that big tech does. You never hear Google say or Microsoft say or Alexa, people who do Alexa say, by the way, Alexa can listen to your conversation, or the people who've got the Apple TV say, by the way, your computer's listening to your conversation and it's now going to give you some pop-up ads of that thing you were just talking about, that Ford F-150 truck you were just talking about. It's never announced. These people, it's as if they are a government unto themselves and a society unto themselves that just don't care to the degree to which they are interfering with elections, that they're abusing the public trust the way they're doing it, and they wield so much power worldwide.
You know, Brent Bozell, this is, I wish what you're saying wasn't true, but I think we know that it is. And I find it just, again, remarkable that you guys put this study together and you've got all these instances here where this has occurred. And it's, again, it's eye-opening to see the extent of which that they go to and how they do it. Let's talk a little bit about how they're getting involved. We know that Google has this, the ability to do so many things. They can read your email. Most people use Google email, kind of replacing Yahoo as the main free email provider out there. And that's just one of the many ways. But what are some of the specific instances that you guys found when you put this review together?
Sure. By the way, Google, in their response to everything I'm about to tell you, said that everything has been debunked. They haven't debunked a single thing that is in this report, not one single thing. 2008, Google CEO Eric Schmidt endorsed Barack Obama. Google also suspended the accounts of writers who opposed Obama in the primary. 2008, Google also censored, believe it or not, Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton was challenging Barack Obama. 2012, we saw how they censored Rick Santorum when he was the leading candidate in the Republican campaign. 2016, again, Schmidt working with the Democratic Party, and this time with Clinton's campaign team hiring, which was this company called The Groundwork, which is a Schmidt-founded tech firm, to help operations, even to help bus Latino voters to the polls. 2020, Google disabled Tulsi Gabbard's ads, again, independent, just as she became the most searched following, the most searched person following the first Democratic debate. So they shut her down. 2022, this is a good one. They buried the campaign websites of GOP candidates throughout the Senate, the Senate campaign. They buried all but two of the Republican candidates' websites in 12 key races. Why is that important? Because surveys are now showing that up to 5% of the American people make their decision on who to vote for based on a Google search. So when you're one of those 5% and you don't even see a Republican, less than 1% go past page one, then that 5% is being pushed right into the Democratic camp. 2024, this is another good one. They have so far in this campaign season, they have censored every candidate except for Joe Biden a total of 112 times in this election cycle. 112 times, and not Joe Biden. Now, can you say that, oops, that's just coincidence? No, it's not just coincidence. That's deliberate.
It's sad. It really is a sad situation because there's no, other than you all, being a watchdog on this, doing what the media should be doing, but there's no regulatory environment that says that you can't do this. Nobody's telling them what to do. It seems like they tell everybody else what to do in Washington.
Yeah, and it's an ugly truth, Rich. Washington, D.C. is for sale at all times. There is no such thing with a handful of organizations. There's no such thing as somebody not having the right price. for them to do the right thing. Every time you see something like this happen and you see some big expose of big tech happen, money pours into Washington, D.C. to stop any criticism of it. And one by one, you start seeing conservative organizations defending them. Just like you saw this week, conservatives defending TikTok. TikTok owned by the Chinese, stealing America data. And there were conservative organizations and conservative people who worked in the Trump administration on Capitol Hill lobbying, all of them being richly compensated, lobbying on behalf of TikTok. This, unfortunately, is the way of the world. There's a solution to all this, and it's just an easy solution, which is Section 230. Not to get very wonkish about this, but Section 230 is a carve-out that big tech got that made them immune from libel action for anything that they might say that is libelous. So that if you, Rich Valdez, say something that is libelous, you can be sued. If the New York Times says something that's libelous, they can be sued. But if Facebook says the exact same thing, or Google does the exact same thing, they're immune from any kind of legal exposure on this. If you took away that one carve-out, that one special privilege that no one else gets, but they have gotten to themselves, the kind of theatrics that they do would end automatically if you could take them to court. In this case, if you had a government that truly wanted to uphold the rule of law, where you have campaign contribution laws on the books, where if your radio station gave contributions to Donald Trump, it would be breaking the law. And yet Google is deliberately participating in this by doing the kind of censorship they're doing, which is a campaign activity, and they're getting away with it.
Brent Bozell, I love that you guys are on top of this and doing what you do at the MRC, Media Research Center, but I got to tell you, it's somewhat disheartening to see how difficult this is, especially with TikTok. And again, this is one of those things that I'm on the fence. I'm not necessarily looking for the government to censor anybody or force divestiture on anyone, but if they are going to do it to anybody, I think TikTok's a great candidate because of the depth of how serious the threat to our national security is, given the pervasiveness of their technology and how in they are, right? With being on everybody's phone, not mine and maybe not some government organizations, but many people nonetheless. Folks, we're on with Brent Bozell, founder and president of the Media Research Center, and we're going to continue our discussion straight ahead with a little bit on the Trump bloodbath hoax that we've been seeing and a couple of other things that are going on. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us now. We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
But
As Politico.com reports tonight on the, quote, bloodbath at the RNC.
Headlines calling it a, quote, bloodbath.
Be a bloodbath. Not only is it going to be a bloodbath, but after they leave New Hampshire, it's a bloodbath on her home turf. That's really tough. Trump has left a lot of corpses in his wake. I mean, we can count the bodies.
As part of the, quote, MAGA drive to take over Maricopa County. And the headline refers to it as an impending bloodbath.
Columnist Charles Blow has a new piece for the New York Times entitled A Biden Bloodbath.
2018 midterms, you can bet that they 100% are fearing a slaughter. In fact, the word bloodbath and massacre come up frequently.
The Republican Party will be destroyed. It's going to be a bloodbath.
It's going to be a bloodbath. Now you heard Trump talking about the bloodbath. Now you're hearing the left and so many clips that you guys have put together where they're saying the same thing. Brent Bozell is our guest. He's the founder and president of the Media Research Center. And Brent Bozell, when you hear this innocuous term used by Trump of bloodbath, and the left trying to immediately turn this into something, a dog whistle call for violence, when they themselves use this term, does this not smack of hypocrisy to you?
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen this. We've been to this movie before. Do you remember, Rich, the phony soldier store accusation against Rush Limbaugh some years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Rush Limbaugh gave a monologue and was accused of tarnishing the reputation of the U.S. military because he said anybody in the military who didn't support American policy in Iraq was a phony soldier. That led to a massive petition on Capitol Hill led by groups like Media Matters to denounce him and to go after his advertisers and everything else. There was only one problem with that. Rush Limbaugh never said that. The transcript of his show was crystal clear. He was talking about people who were impersonating military people so that they could get the health benefits. And there were a lot of prosecutions going on around the country. Clear as night. Okay, what is this bloodbath story all about? Donald Trump is talking to his supporters about auto wars between China and the American automotive industry, saying he can prevent it, that if he's not elected president, there's going to be a bloodbath talking about automotive competition between the two countries. So, A, there was no story about bloodbath whatsoever. But B, and here's the fun part, the way media hide themselves in knots trying to justify what they said about him. Can I give you a couple quotes?
Well, we're running out of time, so I'm going to let people use their imagination on the quotes, but I do want to say that the election, in my opinion, is going to be a bloodbath, and they could quote me on that. And after the election, there's going to be an opportunity to hang out with you, Brent Bozell, right? And I want you to tell us in maybe 15, 20 seconds before the music kicks in, how can people go on the post-election MRC cruise that has a bunch of superstars on it?
Come to on the MRC cruise November 10th. That we're leaving and going to the Caribbean, to all sorts of wonderful places. We are going to drink and celebrate a victory. If we lose, we're just going to sail away and never come back.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Save me a drink, Brent Bozell. Check out Brent Bozell from the Media Research Center and mrccruise.com. Brent Bozell, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Also, these rumors that you've heard about Venezuela letting dangerous criminals out of prison to come to America, they're true. And the same thing is true of countries in Central and South America and across the globe, and as well as the number of Chinese that are coming here. And who knows what their intent is when they come here. Because of that, and because Joe Biden is very simply not following the law of the United States of America. You'll remember just a couple of weeks ago, he was telling all of you and all of his fellow Americans that he needed Congress to pass some laws in order for him to have the ability to secure the border. Either A, he was just outright lying to you. B, he had no idea what he was talking about. Or C, all of the above. I think it's all of the above. Let me be clear about something. Congress has already passed laws that give the president every tool that he needs. Laws that existed before Biden became president.
That is Governor Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, at the Texas Policy Summit today, and reminding those that are in attendance that other countries are sending their criminals to the United States. And it reminds me that this is a message that we can't stop spreading, right? This is a reality that's going on right now. And we've seen it many times result in something that ends with a death, with some sort of critical loss that shouldn't happen, whether it's rape, whether it's some sort of sexual assault. These things are lamentably happening, and they're happening way too much. Now, there's a great piece in American Greatness by Drew Allen titled "The United States Isn't the World's Trash Can." And it specifically speaks to that. Like, the undesirables of your country don't become the next new Americans, as much as people want that to happen. Drew Allen's with us to discuss. He's the author of America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy America in 2024? Drew Allen, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be with you. Crazy times we're living in, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I'm looking at your piece and I'm thinking, great title, by the way, because I think it's important that people really look at it from that perspective and realize we want to help everybody, right? Everybody wants to be benevolent and charitable and generous, but at the same time, you can't cut your nose off to spite your own face.
Well, exactly. And really, this issue strikes at the heart of some of the problems affecting and afflicting American psyche. Because, look, under the Democrat Party, which preaches victimhood and so on and so forth, they create this environment in which Americans have very low self-esteem. And so one of the things I say in the article is, look, America, in my book, I call us the crown jewel of civilization, which is true. But I say, look, we are the Ferrari of civilizations. This is the greatest country ever created in the history of mankind. But the Democrats view us like some Serbian Yugo, which is a infamous junk car that can just be abused and mistreated and destroyed. But you don't become the greatest country in the world by importing trash. And look, the reality is America is great because we've had amazing immigrants who've certainly come here, but they came here without a welfare state, and they came here to what? Make this country better. Look, I'm a Christian. I go out, I go and do service. We have our own poor in this country that need help, veterans and so on and so forth. It's not the government's job. It's not the U.S. government's job. We don't elect these politicians and presidents and so on and so forth to save other countries from poverty and so on and so forth. Their job is to improve the United States of America. So immigration isn't something to help the world's poor. It's intended to make this country better. That is fundamentally what immigration is about.
Well, I think that's an accurate perception of what immigration should be. The problem, Drew Allen, is that I think so many of our politicians think that it's precisely the opposite, that it's exactly the way that we fix other people's problems is by giving them a little bit of what we have.
Well, exactly. And, it can't go unsaid to point out that, of course, the reason these politicians are engaged in this type of behavior is because they're self-serving. They're not looking out for the United States. They're not looking out for the American people. They view these people, yes, as a new underclass that's going to vote for them. And this is something that really needs to be addressed, because if you look at what's happening in the country right now, certainly, I mean, one, the Democrats in some ways kind of ironically have shot themselves in the foot, because a lot of the so-called, illegals and immigrants of the past that came from Mexico or other, even South American countries, they are Catholic, they have traditional values, and they find themselves at odds with the Democrat Party and their philosophy. So actually, like you've seen in certain places in Texas, they've actually kind of rebelled against the Democrat Party, if you will. But now you see, of course, black voters, which historically, as a matter of fact, Democrats have kind of hitched their wagon to, right? They have depended on since FDR getting a majority of the black vote for their electoral success. And even articles in the past would tell you, Democrats would say, they feared black rebellion. Those are their words. And so if they lose the black vote, they can't win elections. So now what do you have? Well, you have 10 million more people being imported to replace black Americans. And black Americans should take note, too, because that's what the Democrat Party views them as. They were just, useful for a moment in time. But the moment you start to rebel against the Democrat Party, well, you also are replaceable.
Drew Allen, this reminds me of a article that I read on Marxist.org that talked about something the communists call the national minority and how they would ingratiate themselves with the national minority. And this article is written back in the, I think, late 70s, early 80s. And they talked about how they would include, at the time, African Americans in the political power structure, even if it was in a unmeaningful role, just so they would feel the perception of power inside of a labor union and, making them a shop steward or something like that. And it was a fascinating article. Again, because given the time that it was written in, when you juxtapose that with today, it's just abundantly clear that it doesn't matter who the national minority is, that's who they're going after, because this is a typical Marxist tactic to have this, like you said, a permanent underclass.
Well, it's so vital that you point out the time period of that article coming out, because if you go back to Lyndon Baines Johnson, who, of course, I write about in the book, it's the myth of the great switch, where Republicans, despite their entire history of trying to push forward civil rights and obviously being champions of blacks in terms of fighting in the Union and so on and so forth, well, he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law, and bada boom, bada bing, all of the Democrats' history was erased, and they became the, unique champions of blacks in America. None of that is true, and it was Republicans, of course, who were instrumental in getting that bill passed. But to your point, Lyndon Baines Johnson made comments to that effect where he'd say, he used the N-word, are getting kind of uppity. We got to give them just a little bit, not enough to really give them anything real, but to give them this perception, that we're helping them, and these are words from Lyndon B. Johnson, the so-called, he sits in the pantheon of Democrat gods, right?
Yeah, I think he sits in the pantheon of avowed racists. I think that's what
for those
he's infamous for
in
that.
the real world. Yeah, exactly.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We're on with Drew Allen, and he's written this amazing book. I think you want to get a copy for yourself, one to give away. The book's called America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy America in 2024? And we're coming right back with Drew Allen. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It's a deeply troubling decision from the extreme conservatives on the Supreme Court. It's clear that we have a broken immigration system. We've acknowledged that, and that we need to address the challenges at the border. We believe that we should address those challenges in a clear-eyed, comprehensive way, in a manner consistent with our values as a nation of immigrants and a nation anchored in the rule of law. We need a strong, secure, and humane border. What we're seeing from many of our Republican colleagues is that they don't want to actually address the issue. They just want to engage in political stunts or try not to solve the issue so they can weaponize the border and immigration issue in November. I think the American people are going to reject that. But what the Supreme Court has done in this particular instance is quite unfortunate.
That, of course, is House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries on CNN yesterday discussing the Supreme Court's decision granting Texas police power to deport illegal aliens, saying that it's deeply troubling. And that's Hakeem Jeffries. Of course, Governor Greg Abbott, you've heard before, saying, look, these countries are sending us their worst, and they've got their hands tied. So I want to jump right back into the conversation we were having with Drew Allen. He is the author of the book, America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy America in 2024? And Drew Allen, when you hear this clip of Minority Leader Jeffries, what's your initial reaction?
Well, it's infuriating because he's gaslighting the American people. And the reason it upsets me is because I actually know there are Americans who believe that to be true, that actually buy that lie that's coming from his mouth. Now, you know, what the Democrats are doing, and some rhinos as well, you know, this border bill they're proposing, you know, this is why I read Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, once a year, because if you read and study that book, none of this will be a surprise to you. You will come to expect these things from people like Hakeem Jeffries. So what we have here is a prototypical, perfect example of Democrats creating a crisis. They have opened the border. It is Joe Biden who on day one rescinded proudly and bragged about, Mayorkas did as well, the fact that he rescinded all of those things that had been written previously by Donald Trump. And you have Hakeem Jeffries now and rhinos who like an open border, who have proposed a bill, right, that failed in the Senate. That, by the way, it wasn't really a border bill. It was like a fund Ukraine and do other stuff. And then like a third thing on the list was the border. And the border bill that they proposed, of course, didn't actually solve the problem. It actually was a legalized illegal immigration bill. But people need to remember, they do this all the time. Inflation Reduction Act. It had nothing to do with reducing inflation. It was a climate bill misnamed the Inflation Reduction Act, because who can oppose an Inflation Reduction Act? So now we have a border bill. Who can possibly oppose a border bill? Well, this is their fault. They've done this intentionally. And the of course, cure is worse than the disease every time with Democrats, because this border bill, again, would legalize the border. And you have to understand, every proposal by Biden and the Democrats, it's not about securing the border. When they talk about additional money or personnel to the border, they are reimagining Border Patrol. See, they view it as like a humanitarian effort, not a patrol to actually prevent illegal immigration. Their problem isn't that there are too many illegals coming across the border. Their problem is they want more illegals to come across, and they actually need more manpower and more clerks down there to facilitate it. That's what's going on. So, no, that infuriates me.
Yeah, no, it really is. That's such a spot-on assessment, Drew Allen, because lamentably, that's exactly what's going on. And they're saying, we can fix this problem. Joe Biden says he can fix the problem at the border if he has more manpower, more money, more this and more that. And in reality, that's not going to do anything. And you've got Brandon Judd and the head of the Border Patrol Council and others all saying, we don't need more money. We don't need more people. We need to allow the people that are here to do their jobs. And it is infuriating. And I think Americans are sick and tired of not only the rhetoric and, being treated that way, lied to, but I think more importantly, they're tired of seeing children die. They're tired of seeing their sons and daughters be, injured and killed and subjected to so much of the crazy that comes with this type of chaos at the border.
Well, and it's worth pointing out, I think, that, when it comes to, murders committed by, something that fits the narrative. Maybe it's not an illegal immigrant that does the killing, or it's a mass shooting. What do Democrats, Obama, what do they all say? If it would save one life, we should just get rid of the Second Amendment. But, when it comes to illegals raping and pillaging and killing people, they don't propose at all, actually securing the border. If it would save one life, there would be a lot of people alive today in America if we didn't have these illegals here, because by virtue of them not being here, they couldn't commit the murders that they have. And so, this is one of those things that just gets old with the Democrats and their talking points. But, I just think that we're headed towards some kind of constitutional crisis in many ways, because it is unprecedented to what's happening now. And, the Democrats' arguments about preventing Texas from doing the job the federal government isn't doing is about the supremacy clause, which says that, those enumerated powers that are given to the federal government via the Constitution, which are very few, by the way, well, the states cannot overrule those things that have to do with national security. But you see, this is unprecedented, because what you have here is a federal government that is violating the Constitution. It's your job to secure the border. And so it's not a supremacy clause. If we're talking about supremacy, to me, supremacy is national security. So what do? What is the state's role when the federal government refuses not only to do its job, but actually violates the Constitution and becomes an enemy in the sense that it's actually facilitating illegal immigration? Can Texas not step in and do the job of the federal government when the federal government refuses to do it? See, this is the conversation we need to have in the country, but instead it's, this is the federal. Yeah, no kidding. It's the federal government's job, and they're not doing it.
100% right. Folks, we're coming right back with Drew Allen, the author of the book, America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy America in 2024?
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, welcome back. We're on with our guest, Drew Allen. Now, Drew Allen. Hello? All right. The music threw me off. Drew Allen, let everybody know where they could find you.
Sure. drewallen.substack.com. They can keep up with my writings and all the stuff I'm up to. And then the book is, America's Last Stand.
Outstanding. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program, the Wednesday night edition of America at Night. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, for Valdez. And a few things we're talking about. I mean, to recap the show, we've talked about a number of things. We talked about the border tonight. We've talked about the battle between mob rule and the rule of law. And we also talked about election interference and how the media is just complicit in all things anti-Trump. And speaking of anti-Trump, the judge in Fulton County says that Trump will be allowed to appeal the Funny Willis ruling. And that's good on him. And something that came out of the Funny Willis case, not that funny, but still funny, is one of the witnesses called in that case was literally high on the stand and admitted to it. Listen to this.
You just heard that you explained that we qualified that, you qualified it as the detectives and police. And I asked you the authorities, the police, the prosecutors, I just made it broad, that they forced Jeffrey Williams into it. Did you hear you say that?
Man, can I get a water or something? I'm so high right now, y'all. I'm about to go to sleep on y'all now. I ain't gonna tell you no lie.
I am so high right now, I'm about to go to sleep on y'all, he said. That's real. That really happened. I mean, the things that are happening in Funny Willis's part of the world, funny. It's crazy stuff. I mean, this is the witness that they call. I mean, the whole thing is just crazy in that part of the world. What is going on in Georgia, right? In the ATL, in the A. What's going on? Really, man. I don't know. I really don't know, but I think that's crazy. Now, again, the story I just shared with you, that the Fulton County judge has now certified an order regarding the Willis and Wade debacle and allowing for an immediate appeal. That was the decision on Friday by Scott McAfee regarding the motions to disqualify District Attorney Funny Willis and her lead prosecutor and former love interest from the case, obviously involving President Trump, and several other defendants that were also in that case. And the decision that they came up with was one of them's got to go, right? And Nathan Wade decided to step aside so Funny Willis could continue doing her thing, which I guess was the only path forward. You weren't going to get the DA, I think, to step aside. Although I guess you could have. And that might have actually been better for her, because she could have been like, all right, if it doesn't look good, then I'll step aside and Mr. Wade can continue. But she decided to take the reins, and I think that's probably to her detriment because he seemed to be more intimately involved in the case than she was. Anyway, McAfee ruled that Willis could remain on the case, but that Nathan Wade would have to go. And this entire thing now is up for an appeal, saying, if you need an appeal, go right ahead. And it remains to be seen whether Trump will appeal that. Trump's very busy suing people because George Stephanopoulos was out there, obviously trashing him and maligning him and slandering him and all that stuff. So just a very interesting situation with this particular case, as well as the other Trump case out of New York. Now, again, I want to get to your calls. I see some calls are trickling in right now, and we're going to get to you momentarily. 833-482-5337. Let's go to New Hampshire. WUVR. Anthony in Charlestown, New Hampshire. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Just wanted to say I love the show.
Thank you.
The one thing that's got me confused is why the Republican Party hasn't floated around the word treason more about the current administration for the what they've done to the southern border.
Yeah, well, this comes up a lot. And while I'm with you that I think in the grand scheme of things, it's treasonous. It sure is. I think Biden is a traitor to his country and to his office. However, I think because of the technical legal definition of treason, which is aiding and abetting a foreign enemy that we're currently at war with, is the actual definition as I understand it, being that we're not at war with any number of different people. There's no current declared war going on right now. I think this is why they don't do that from a legal perspective. Again, from a practical perspective, it's absolutely treasonous in my opinion, and I agree with you. And even if they didn't go that route, they should threaten it, right? And they should try to paint the picture a better way. I think the other part of it might be that this type of language, while it's inaccurate from a legal perspective, is used very heavily by just about anybody who's upset, right? People are upset. You're a traitor. It's treason. You should be hung, right? Everybody, some people go to that far extreme. We haven't hung a president ever in United States history. I doubt that that's ever going to happen. And because of that, I think there are just a lot of people that are, I'm going to go with bloodthirsty. And they want that because they're so angry. And I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying they are. And I think some people get led to believe that that is a possible outcome that might occur, that if we're angry enough, we could get the result we'd like. We can get our country back by, I don't know, arresting everyone that's doing the wrong thing and somehow, locking them all up and throwing away the key. And that's a farce. We saw that with Hillary Clinton, lock her up, lock her up. It never happened. And it won't. It's not how our system works. As you can see, the swamp is a very powerful thing. Trump went in there as commander-in-chief, tried to make a couple of moves, and the next thing you know, he was a Russian asset, and they were trying to oust him, spying on him, and trying to put him in jail for the next several years. So clearly, the swamp is something to be reckoned with, and this is why you can't be so over the top with your rhetoric. I think you gotta take your shots and choose them wisely. At least that's my thought on that. And I do appreciate your call from Charlestown, New Hampshire, Anthony. What's the weather like right now in your neck of the woods? Oh, Anthony is not there anymore. Well, thank you, Anthony, again for the call. I do appreciate it. And I'm going to take a pause right here. Then we'll come back with the rest of your calls from Arkansas, Illinois, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And we continue our discussion. One of the things I want to talk about tonight is the United States dropping off the list of happiest countries for the first time ever. That's right. This is according to The Hill and Nexstar. The grass may indeed be greener, they say, on the other side, or at least in 22 other countries around the world. The United States dropped to 23rd place in the annual World Happiness Report. I remember this story last year, and we weren't doing well, but we weren't doing this bad. In the first time ever, the United States has been outside the top 20 list in the 12-year history that they've had this report. The drop in America's happiness score was due in part to a big drop in the well-being of young people. If you just look at the happiness of people under 30 in the United States, they actually ranked in the 62nd place. Not very good, right, for happy people. People over the age of 60, the U.S. came in 10th place. So older people are happy. Go figure. Canada, New Zealand, Australia all have similarly large discrepancies where young people are much less happy than older people. It's been a growing problem since 2010, according to the report. And I find this fascinating. And all I can think of is the older you are, the less screen time you had as a kid, as a young adult, whatever, and probably still do. right? I mean, maybe you're one of those people that's in their 60s now and spends tons of time on an iPad or in front of a computer or something, playing with Facebook or enjoying, your family time, connecting to your family members through social media, whatnot. However, I can see how these young people are dissatisfied because they're connected to games. They're connected to so many things that they think are really enjoyable pastimes that I would say they're really, really not. My idea of a good time is still going to a party. I like a good party, a good nightclub, restaurant, lounge where you could just socialize with people, listen to music. I like hip hop and reggaeton. Those are my favorite genres. And I like everything, honestly, but those are my two favorites. And I enjoy a good social gathering, a cocktail party, whatever it is. I just enjoy talking to people, socializing, and of course, there's got to be some music going on. And I feel like that isn't necessarily the case with a lot of people that are younger than me. A lot of them are just have a different thing in mind. They're homebodies, and mainly because of the economy, I would suppose. They grew up different because they were more electronic. I don't know. But I want to get your thoughts on this stuff. Let's go to Reading, Pennsylvania, and check in with Eddie. Eddie's on WEEU. Eddie, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
I always enjoy your programs. I get a lot of good information, Rick. What I wanted to say was, in the survey, what surprised me was the country that came in number 5 after the first 4 Scandinavian countries. And also it came in second for being the happiest for young people in the world. And the country was Israel. And that amazed me because their country has been through so much turbulence, and the survey was done while the war is going on right now, and it amazed me at the difference between how they feel and how we feel, and we have so many more advantages in America than what they do.
Yeah, well, excellent point, Edgar. Thank you so much. I appreciate your call. Big shout out to everybody in Reading, Pennsylvania on WEEU. And I want to continue. Let's go to the middle of the country, Akron, Ohio. Check in with Roger on WNIR. Roger, what say you, sir?
Hello. How you doing, Rich?
Wonderful.
Great show.
Thank you.
Yeah. You were asking about the kids plugged into their the younger generation.
Yeah, it seems to me, right? It seems to me that because kids are so plugged into different things that I feel like they might be less happy because they're not enjoying people, right? They don't go out to a party and dance or socialize. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm generalizing. I do know that from one of our guests, and I'd seen this data before, that some young people, and when I say young people, I mean Generation Z, like the age of my children, they're also more willing to get married. They're tending and trending towards being more conservative than millennials are. So I'm not trashing them by any means, but I think that might be part of why young people are so unhappy. I also think young people in particular, are unhappy because their lives were stolen from them during COVID, and they were told it was a good thing, and they were supposed to like it. And it was kind of like, hey, stay home, don't talk to anybody, don't touch anybody, don't socialize with anybody. If you look at your grandmother the wrong way, she might die if you don't wear a mask. I mean, it was just a horrible time. And I think that has caused a lot of mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and things like that. And I also think we have exacerbated the notion of depression and anxiety and mental health issues to where I would say there's probably more people, and maybe I'm right or wrong, maybe our studio team can fact check me here, but if I had to guess, I would say more people that are younger than 40 are suffering from mental health issues than people older than 40. Maybe I'm wrong, but that would be my supposition. Anyway, tell me what's on your mind, Roger, in Akron.
Your caller asked me, or your screener asked me, I was going to say something about all the money that stupid fine they gave Trump. But
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, all that, I guess I'm kind of tired of talking about it, actually. But what you're saying, I'm all in with that, because actually, a matter of fact, when my mother was passing away, she had to mention, when everybody would leave and I'd be the last one there, we have a big family, and I would be with her, and she'd say, she's still there she'd say, I don't know why they all came. They all just sit there looking at their phones the whole time.
Yeah, and I think and God rest your soul, Roger. I appreciate you sharing that with me. But let me tell you, I think it's amazing the way they've tried to put this on Trump, the fine, and saying that he needs a bond for close to $500 million. And one of the guys from Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, he was on TV, I think yesterday or today on CNN, and he set the record straight. He's letting this woman know this is not even a possibility. It's not even something that's a real thing. People don't give you $500 million bonds. Listen to this.
What a great message to send out all around the world. Take a claim where there was no monies lost. There was no fraud here in the context of actually people losing money. Deutsche Bank, who made the loan, was made whole. And let's make a penalty of $500 million against a crime, apparently, where no monies were lost. Great message for New York. Great message for America. Bring your capital because we'll protect your property. I think that was a statement that would be much better made sometime in Venezuela. I'm not kidding. That's a scary, scary message. And by the way, there are no such thing as $500 million bonds.
The marketplace.
There are no $500 million bonds. Never been done before. Never. This law has never been applied. Forget about Trump. Nothing to do with Trump. Everything to do about America and the New York brand. I love this state. My children live here. A horrible message to everybody around the world watching this. Absolutely horrific.
Well,
This
wait,
case
Kevin,
goes
Kevin,
way
but
past
hold on a
Trump.
second, Kevin.
Trump
What would
will
be
be gone one day. This
hold on a
attorney
second.
general will be gone one day, and this
I
is
have
what
a
you want
wonderful
to tell
voice,
people
and
around
it
the
won't
world.
be talked
This
over.
is how we
Kevin
treat money
O'Leary,
in America.
I would like to hear what you have to say, but
America.
What are you doing?
Not America.
But it's not America, but it is the Laura Coates live show, and I am speaking. So that will be the rule, not Venezuela,
America.
nowhere else. Fine, but it's Laura Coates live. And hello, my name is Laura Coates.
I guess that's a point of personal privilege when you have a show with your name in it. Oh, boy, Roger. What do you think? Do you think Trump is going to end up figuring out a legal way to get around this fine?
It's just like you think you're going to wake up pretty soon. It was just a bad dream. It's that bad. I
agree with you. It's a tough spot. Thank you, Roger. The music means we got to go. But we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Folks, don't go anywhere. The number 833-4825-337, 8334-VALDEZ. It's Open Phone America, taking your calls from one end of the country to the other, and we do it live. Not like the other guys. Why? Well, because they're not live. And if you're listening to us on delay, well, thanks for listening anyway. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez here with you till 1 a.m. Eastern time. We do it live, and happy to be with you. Let me see. What did I want to talk about here? Mr. Hinton, do you know what we were talking about here? All right. None of us know what we're talking about. Actually, we were continuing with your calls. 833-4825-337. And we were talking about a discrepancy. You know what it was? We were having this sidebar conversation, and we'll continue this with one of our experts in the days to come. But I either on the air or during the break, I told him that it's my supposition that the younger people are likely suffering from mental health problems more so than others. And he had some information. Mr. Hinton, turn the mic on and share what you found in your research. Here he is.
All right. Hello. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
So what I found was that your information earlier was correct. According to the NIH, when they study mental illness, young adults aged 18 to 25 had the highest prevalence, with 33% reporting that they experienced some form of mental illness. The age group of 26 to 49 years had 28.1%. And the age 50 and older, only 15% experienced mental illness.
Isn't that interesting? Well, thank you, Mr. Hinton, Alex Hinton, everyone. And what's interesting about this is, again, I did that just based on a whim of life. I see life, and I have this unique perch, right, where I get to talk to people from all over the place on this radio program. And in real life, people invite me to different things, and I get to meet people. And when you do that stuff and you just observe people, I find that young people I've never met somebody that's like 60 years old that says things like, "Oh, I need a mental health day." I've never heard that come out of someone that's older than me's mouth. I just haven't heard it. But it's quite common amongst people that are younger than me. And I realized that society changed and made things more acceptable. Now, I'm not saying people don't need mental health days. I'm sure they do. But my point is that there was this focus on mental health for young people, where older people, there was no focus on that. It was never an excuse. And I'm not saying that it's false or it's unwarranted. I am just saying that there's such a focus on it, almost a hyper focus, that they're so attuned with the focus on their mental health that it may get in the way of other things, and that's why so many of them identify as having issues with mental health. Plus, when you look at the data, whenever we look at data with like LGBTQ or more specifically, those that are receiving gender affirming care, as they like to call it, or genital mutilation, those that identify as transgender and whatnot, it's the vast majority are younger people. And the younger you are, it seems like the more susceptible you are to mental health issues. I don't know why, but that seems to be the case. And that was my gut thinking on that. And it looks like my gut was right. Good thing I have a healthy-sized gut. Anyway, let's get back to your calls. 833-4825-337-833-4-Valdez. I want to go to Joe, Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. Go right ahead, Joe.
Hey, Rich, you outdone yourself tonight. The topics and the guests are extraordinary.
Thank you.
I heard you mention AOC earlier.
All out crazy.
And you're talking about mental illness. It reminds me of Michael Savage on his show. He always said that modern liberalism is a mental disease. Well, she's exhibit one, if you ask me. And I hope she doesn't have a husband because I feel really bad for him.
She does have a long-term boyfriend. Seems like a heck of a nice guy. He was in that video that we played recently, a guy named Riley Roberts, redheaded guy, taller guy, and seems very supportive. He's always there with her. I don't know that they're married or they have children. I think she's said on occasion that she's afraid to have children because of climate change. But they are engaged to be married.
Quite the nutcase. Number two,
all out crazy.
Lee Habeeb.
Yes.
Hey, thank you for that interview because we get him at KSAR Monday through Friday, 9 to noon Central Time. And between him and your 9 to midnight Central Time here, that's 6 of the best hours of radio a person could have. I love both of them.
Well, yeah, he is a national treasure, and I really do appreciate you saying that. And between Lee Habeeb and AOC, you're right. It's quite a contrasting show, Joe.
And listen, number three, I'll make it quick here. I support Governor Abbott 100% and then some. I mean, I would start deputizing every law-abiding citizen in Texas, and if necessary, call out the sister states unorganized militia, so that Joe Biden don't have any control over them to come and help. Texas has been a good neighbor to the South, always will be, and he's doing what is called in common law the necessity defense. When you've got malfeasance on the part of the so-called authorities and shirking their responsibilities to keep law and order, he has no choice. And in American jurisprudence, that has been proven to be a lawful defense at common law. So I just want to say he's applying it. I wish they'd talk about it a little bit, the necessity defense.
Joe, very good comment. What I'll say is I think that Governor Abbott is just being conservative in his approach. I hope we don't get to where he needs to do that and where that becomes a thing, because that can become very contentious. And it reminds me of a time in Texas, right? Think of the Branch Davidians or other situations like that and how that ended up when you had people that weren't backing down. And again, apples and orange comparison here. But my fear is always when you have a group of patriots that say, you know what, enough is enough, and we're going to defend our country, at least our state, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Like years ago, there were the Minutemen. These guys were mounted on horses at the border. I mean, the border's always been an issue for Texas. And I would hate to see something like what happened in Waco happen anywhere else. But my fear, and it's a legitimate fear, is that this regime, the Biden regime, would be capable of doing something so egregious, like hurting or trying to stop a group of patriots from doing what they believe is right. Now, some people listening right now are thinking, Richard, you're calling for armed vigilantes to go and take the law into their own hands. No, I'm saying that if such a defense, like you're saying, Joe, were to be enacted, this would have to be an absolute necessity. And every other opportunity would have to have been exhausted by that time, because it could potentially become, like Trump and the leftist media said, it could become a bloodbath, and nobody wants that to happen. Joe, thank you for your call. Big shout out to everybody listening on KSAR. I'm Rich Valdez, coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Open Phone America. We're going to your calls momentarily. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Bloomington, Illinois, and check in with Becky on WHOW. Becky, go ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Thanks for talking to me.
My pleasure.
I heard earlier in the week that they were going to start a GoFundMe page for Donald Trump with that lawsuit. So then today somebody was telling me that they're trying to say that doing that is illegal if people donate to that GoFundMe for Donald Trump. Did you hear anything about that?
I didn't, but I was looking into it a little bit before. They did start a GoFundMe page. I think it raised $1.3 million, and their goal was, $455 or $454 million, and I guess they're still raising money. Some people complained and said, how dare you raise money for a criminal like Trump, and urged GoFundMe to take the page down. GoFundMe said that they would not take it down because it did not violate their terms of service, and I believe the page is still up. My thought is, if somebody were to say that it is illegal, it would be in the sense that this could potentially skirt campaign finance laws if that money is used for something. Again, this is what the New York case is about, and I don't agree with this legal premise, but I'm just sharing with you how they come up with these crazy stories. Right, the New York case was about his lawyer paying $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, and then him writing that as a legal expense. And the state attorney general, Alvin Bragg, right, the district attorney for the New York County, he turns around and says, well, that $130,000 wasn't a legal expense where you were paying your lawyer who laid that money out for you, but instead this was an actual campaign expense, because you did that because you intended to run for president. And that was a reputation management issue related to the campaign Therefore, you didn't report it as a campaign expense, and that's why we're prosecuting you. I think that's an incredible stretch, and it's BS from the beginning to the end. And not because I'm a fan of Trump's, but because any guy with whether you have money or not, right? If somebody's saying that you cheated on your wife and we had an affair, blah blah blah, and you say I'm going to pay you off to shut you up because we're going to have an agreement here that you're going to stop that line of argument and we're going to settle. I don't think it matters if you're running for president or not. You're protecting your family, you're protecting your reputation, you're protecting your business interests. You want to get out of the media eye that way. You don't want that story out there. I think that's perfectly legitimate and within the confines of the law to do such a thing. So I think that's why this Alvin Bragg case, to me, is such a fake, phony, fraudulent case to begin with. But if they're going to use that kind of logic to say that these expenses are not this and not that, and say you're running for president and you just got $450 million, and who in their right mind is able to donate more than $2,600 to your campaign? Nobody, right? Because you're not allowed to donate more than $2,600 to a presidential campaign or a federal campaign. So I could see somebody making that argument, saying that, that violates whatever. And I guess as long as you do it right and you get the lawyers, hopefully you can mitigate some of that legal fallout. But I would always expect, if you're Trump, expect lawfare, right? Expect them to come after you with some fake, phony, fraudulent stuff to try and hamstring you one way or the other, Becky.
I just don't understand how that could be illegal. That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, well, again, I don't know that it is illegal, but based on what I just told you, I think that would be one of the arguments they would make, is that if you or me wanted to donate money to the Trump campaign, even if you had $50,000, you can't go ahead and give $50,000 as an individual, but you can go ahead and give $50,000 to a GoFundMe. And if I was running against Trump, I would say Trump's illegally raising money for his campaign by using a GoFundMe instead of using a campaign account, and therefore skirting the system, and he's a criminal. And I could see the Democrats doing that all day. It doesn't mean it's true, but I could see them throwing that kind of mud because that's what they do. They're expert at that. Anyway, Becky, thank you for the call. I really appreciate it. Always good to hear from you. Folks, we're going to pause right here. We're going to come back to the rest of your calls. Rochester, Minnesota, Ottumwa, Iowa, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
To the money flow, because this is where the rubber meets the road. On August 3rd, they actually stipulate through WhatsApp text messages the exact stipulations of the deal. On August 4th, $100,000 is wired into Owasco PC from CEFC Infrastructure. Mr. Chairman, I want to submit for the record a portion of the bank statement for the time period August 3rd of 2017 to August 31, 2017, stipulating $100,000 going from CEFC into the bank account of Hunter Biden through Owasco PC.
Without objection, so ordered.
On August 8th, 4 days later, $5 million is then transferred from the Northern International Capital account of $5 million to Hudson West III. Hudson West III is a bank account controlled by Hunter Biden and Mr. Gong Wang, a.k.a. Kevin Dong, who is a CEFC associate. That money comes from the Northern International Capital bank account that is tied to the CCP. Mr. Chairman, I want to submit for the record the bank statement demonstrating that transfer.
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay, moving on. On August 8th, the same time period, there is a wire transfer of $400,000 to Owasco PC from the Hudson West III bank account. That $400,000, Mr. Chairman, I have the transfer records in the bank accounts from the August time period. I want to submit that for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Now, here's where the fun stuff comes in, everybody, and I got a minute to do it, so we're going to get this done. On August 14th, there is $150,000 that is transferred from Owasco PC, which is controlled by Hunter Biden, to Lion Hall Group, which is controlled by James Biden. I have the records here, Mr. Chairman, of the $150,000 that has gone to Lion Hall Group from Owasco PC. I want to submit that for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
On August 28th, and I believe we have a screenshot for everybody in the room. On August 28th, Mr. Chairman, we have the withdrawal ticket from Lion Hall Group that is signed by Sarah Biden, who is the wife of Jim Biden, for $50,000 to withdraw from Lion Hall Group. I want to submit that withdrawal receipt for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
On September 3rd, on August 28th, actually, Mr. Chairman, we have the deposit reference into Sarah Jones Biden's account on the same day she withdrew it from Lion Hall. I want to submit
without
that.
Without objection, to ordered.
And without objection, right? Submitted to the record. And the last one that he talks about, of course, that's Congressman Byron Donalds from Florida. Great job he did. The last one is Joe Biden getting $40,000 in a loan repayment. President Joe Biden, not Vice President, not candidate Biden, but President Joe Biden, still getting money from this money coming through Hunter Biden that has, what he's pointing out, are links to CEFC, the Chinese Communist Party involved energy company. So you look at that and you say, man, not a good look that the president's making this money. But that's where we are, and yet they want to come after Donald Trump. Let's go to Nancy in Ottumwa, Iowa, KBIZ. Nancy, go right ahead quickly.
Yeah, I want to say the more they do to Trump, the more I want to vote for him.
You know, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of Americans that feel the exact same way. And I really appreciate you staying up late and giving us a call, Nancy. It's very sweet of you. Thank you for your call. Let's go to David in Rochester, Minnesota, KROC. David, go right ahead quickly.
Yeah, I was just calling about the mental health comments and stuff earlier, and I was just going to say, I think the older generation, too, just has just as many mental health issues and things. They just haven't identified or know how to identify them as well. And it's kind of a thing. Like, I know I'm 39, 40 years old, so I'm like in the middle of the generations where I get to see the older and the younger, and it's kind of like living with my parents.
Well, the numbers disagree with you, and I would disagree with you too. I think my observation is I think people are a lot more mentally sound. Doesn't mean that everybody that's older than 40 or 50, but I can tell you people that are in their 50s and 60s seem to be so much more well-adjusted than people that are teens and 20s. And I guess some of that is age, some of it might be finances, but I think overall it's what they've learned. Thank you, brother. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America, take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez.